go take minutes from the time I missed. How's that?
Okay, we are being recorded.
Okay, good afternoon. This is the August 20th, 2020 meeting of the Lebanon Energy Advisory Committee, which I'm calling to order at this point in time. It's 4:05 p.m. As chair of LEAC, due to the coronavirus pandemic and pursuant to Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12, issued on March 23rd, 2020, in accordance with Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically without a quorum physically present in the same location. Please, could somebody mute who's making noise? Probably Tad, no. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with Emergency Order number 12, we've taken action to provide public access to the meeting by telephone with potential additional access by video through Microsoft Teams, provide public notice of necessary information for accessing the meeting on the city's website and otherwise, and provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. Which would be to attempt to call or email tad.montgomery@lebanonnh.gov. For this meeting, Microsoft Teams is being used as the communication platform. All members of the committee have the ability to communicate contemporaneously, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in the meeting by visiting lebanonnh.gov/live. And clicking on the pertinent listed meeting. Instructions on how to attend are provided on the webpage to assist in preparation of meeting minutes and to ensure all participants are aware of who's participating. All speakers are asked to identify themselves and spell their first and last names before beginning to speak. Committee members don't need to do that. In order to ensure the best possible transmission, you can disable your camera if it seems like it's taken up too much bandwidth. If you have a problem, call 678-1007, which is Tad's cell phone, or email montgomery@lebanonnh.gov. In the event of technical difficulties, we will adjourn the meeting and reschedule it. All votes will be taken by roll call. We're going to start with roll call of attendance of the members. Please state whether there's anyone in the room with you during the meeting, which is also an obscure requirement of RSA 91A for virtual meetings. So this is Clifton Belo. I'm present in my office with no one else here. Greg.
Greg Ames. No one else is here.
John.
I'm present in my study with no one else here.
John Chaffee, yes. Greg. Gene.
I'm here and it's just me.
And Megan.
This is Megan Butts and I am alone in the room right now.
And Woody.
Woody Rouse here alone.
And Gene, are you now a full member or still?
I believe I am still an alternate.
Oh. Somebody just got reappointed.
That was me. But I think I was an alternate before, unless they made me a full member.
I think we may have upgraded you to a full member. If in any case, if you're an alternate, I'm going to appoint you to sit in the place of, I guess, Joan Monroe from the planning board. He's not here.
Joan is here.
Joan is here.
Joan is here. I'm sorry, I will not do that then. I will appoint you in place of the non-existent high school student representative if you're an alternate, but I think we may have actually appointed you as a regular member at a recent council meeting. In any case, Joan, care to identify yourself?
I did. Joan Monroe, present and alone.
Okay, we can move along to the, oops, too many mouses. Acceptance of the minutes of July 16, 2020, which Greg has nicely prepared and had circulated to us.
Is it that you need a motion, Cliff?
I do need a motion.
Then we can discuss.
Yes.
Motion to approve the minutes by Monroe.
Okay. And seconded by,
Megan Butts will second that.
okay, great. Any
I have-
discussion on the minutes? Any edits?
I have to add some.
Okay,
Ready?
Sure.
Under the section other and open to the public, down at the bottom,
Wait, let me, before you,
too fast.
yeah, I'm not there yet.
Okay, last page. Just about a little past halfway down.
I'm sorry, where are we?
Last page,
Last page, got it. Yep.
other and open to the public. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. Third line up from the bottom. I have to change what you said.
Okay.
And I'll just say, because I'm on the planning board and I'm not allowed by regulations to discuss applications that are still before us. However, I can relay minimal information about them that is already public knowledge. So I'd like to switch it to where it says, Joan reported that the heater landing project is new and only just came in front of the planning board this week. Because what I was implying was I didn't really know anything about it. We hadn't started discussing it. We just were aware that it was in the pipeline.
so it's just inserting the word only in front of just.
Right. Thank you, Cliff.
Okay,
And then it says Joan briefly mentioned, and I think it would be better to say briefly described, because I thought that's what I was doing. The compressed natural gas project at Novo Nordisk, which currently uses gas sourced from the Bethlehem, New Hampshire landfill. And then I'd like to add a sentence that says, this is an application currently before the planning board. So that it's clear that I didn't make any comments about, I didn't give my opinion whether I'm for it or against it, or I think it's going to be approved or not, but just that it is before us.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for me. That will
Which is-
keep me legal.
yes.
And so Joan, can you just reread
Sure.
this portion briefly and just make
Okay.
sure that I caught
Okay.
everything?
So I have Joan reported that the heater landing project is new and only just came in front of the planning board this week. And then Joan briefly described the compressed natural gas project at Novo Nordisk, which currently uses gas sourced from the Bethlehem, New Hampshire landfill. Then, new sentence, this is an application currently before the planning board, because at that point we hadn't voted on it yet.
Right. Were you reading my text on the screen or what you had written?
Oh, I had written what I had written.
Oh, I wondered. Okay, I think that I got it correctly.
It's
so.
the same.
What you have on the screen exactly matched what Joan just read.
Yeah.
You're perfect.
Good. Okay, sorry about that.
No
Thank you.
problem. Any
Oh.
other edits? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote, and this will be a roll call vote. I vote yes. Greg,
Greg votes yes.
Joan,
Joan votes yes.
Megan,
Megan votes yes.
Jean,
Gene votes yes.
Woody,
Woody says yes.
John.
John votes yes.
Okay, the minutes are approved unanimously. We go to our next item on the agenda, which is an EV subcommittee update. And I think Megan may have to leave sometime too, so she can report on that. We did have a brief meeting, yesterday?
Yes. Have it somewhere here. Greg was so kind to take the minutes and share the minutes, so I'm going to take a minute to appreciate him for taking minutes because I hate it. It's not coming up. Let's see. Okay. So we met yesterday after a few months of not being able to connect. I guess the first thing is the Electrify America update. You've probably seen it in the news. Tad can definitely elaborate a little bit, but as of right now, they are not going with the City of Lebanon location down by the Northern Rail Trail head. So long story short, DOT takes a long time and they just weren't on board with in the correct time frame that Electrify America was looking for. So the committee is talking about other alternatives, and I guess I'll leave it at that for me. Tad, if you want to add anything to that specific item, feel free.
The only thing I'll add is that I was able to talk briefly with George Sykes, Councillor Sykes, last night after a tour of City Hall, and just brought the subject up to him and mentioned that if we were able to magically get cooperation from New Hampshire DOT and get a hold of the document that lays out roles and responsibilities of the city for that piece of land, I might be able to go back to Electrify America and say, hey, here's what you were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, whoa, I hadn't heard that. I need to talk with the commissioner anyway. I will include that.
Okay, great. The committee spent quite a bit of our meeting time yesterday talking about some other strategies to bring charging stations to Lebanon, not just the DC fast chargers, perhaps public use level 2s, which was I think our initial start in the beginning, but because of this Electrify America opportunity, we kind of dropped that temporarily. But so we spent a lot of time thinking about what sort of strategies and what we're going to do with that. So we have an ask for LEAC to discuss this opportunity. Greg, do you have the wording in these minutes anywhere?
You're muted,
Okay.
Greg.
Oh, I
Greg,
found them.
give me
I found
one.
them.
You got
Yep.
them? Okay.
Yep. So we are thinking, the EV subcommittee is thinking about proposing to the city council that they kind of give us a thumbs up that we should move ahead and relook at some of the public charging site opportunities for level 2, as opposed to just the fast chargers, which needs more space and has a different clientele, so to speak. So we had made a motion to recommend that the full LEAC recommend to the city council that we investigate further the possibility of installing level 2 chargers for public use at the following locations: Kilton Library, Hanover Street Mall, Colburn Park, the Green, Port Street parking lot, Lower Taylor Street lot, or the airport, and to get council input or consensus on installation of public level 2 chargers. So Greg, do you have them with you and you want to just throw it up there so I don't have to repeat that by any chance? Or I certainly can too.
Do you want me to share my screen?
Yeah, just because it's a lot of different locations and I want people to feel comfortable with that.
There we go. So
It's under
Just
item
make
4.
it big.
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, and it's under item 4.
So,
Yep. So I guess EV subcommittee is asking LEAC if you have any questions or if we want to just go ahead and move this.
I got a
Or
question.
is there a motion?
Woody's got a question.
Sure.
We had talked at one point about behind the fire station right there in downtown Leb, and for some reason the manager said there was going to be a lot of work done, and that should come off the list. I'm not persuaded that we should. I think we should pursue that spot in any case. It's just such a beautifully situated spot. That parking lot right behind the fire station.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I took it off is because Sean said that that whole area is most likely going to get redeveloped.
I think there's been an ongoing facility study for fire and police. I think one of the, we haven't had the final report back to the council yet, but my impression is that the biggest facility, perhaps the single biggest facility concern in the city right at this point is the main fire station, and the adequacy of that from a number of points of view. And I think the sense of the manager, I get the sense is that that it's not terribly viable for that to continue to be the main fire station as it is. And so either there'd be a significant renovation at that site, or there may be a relocation, in which case, and of course the old Lebanon Village Marketplace is still has a significant vacancy in it, the whole main floor. And so I think just at this point, his feeling, and maybe shared by others, is that there's just a lot of up in the air about that site, but there is active kind of consideration going on about changes in that overall site. And one of the possibilities that's been discussed is, a general redesign of the whole site, including both from the fire station to the old village market space site. And that there is a mixture of public land and private land in that area, but that's my impression. So I think, Woody, you're right. If things were going to look like they'd be kind of static for a while, that would be a very good site to consider. And they may end up being static for a while in terms of the city's financial situation. So I don't feel strongly whether that gets put back on the list or not. But I think Tad's and my sense is that it's maybe just as well not to include that at this point. And maybe there should be an elastic clause there, or that says, or other potential sites, because this is not to say that we're not asking the council to approve these sites, but rather that we go ahead and provide more investigation in terms of what a level 2 charging opportunity might be for some of these locations. And maybe it should be or other appropriate locations in that list as well.
Yeah, I was just suggesting locations. I wasn't considering an exhaustive list.
Yeah, I like that idea, 'cause it wouldn't hurt to, even add that site or just say other blanket other, because we're just asking basically for, we don't want to waste our time looking into this if the city's not, if they're not interested. So I guess any other site is a good idea.
Or we could say for public use, such as at Kilton Library, et cetera, et cetera.
I can get behind that.
I guess the question is, Greg, Megan, and I all voted for this. So the question is for the rest of the group, do you think this is a good idea? And if so, somebody could make a motion and we can move ahead. And I'll report it back to the council if we do approve a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead, John.
Monroe here. Monroe makes a motion that the Energy Committee suggests, adopts. What word would you like?
Well, it's sort of right there on the screen.
Okay.
Recommend to the City Council that we investigate further the possibility of installing level 2 charges for public use.
Such as at Kilton Library, Hanover Street Mall, Coburn Park / Green, Court Street parking, Lower Taylor Street lot, or the airport. And do we need to add to get council input, consensus? Do we need that much?
No, you can stop right there.
Okay.
Because that's just stating the purpose of it, which I can explain. Yep.
Okay. So it stops at airport.
Or other location.
Or other locations.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Gene?
I'll second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call. John? Time for everyone to come off mute. I'll come back to,
John votes yes.
okay, Woody,
Woody votes yes.
Joan,
Joan votes yes.
Jean,
Gene votes yes.
Megan,
Megan also votes yes.
Greg,
Greg votes yes.
and the chair votes yes. It's adopted unanimously. Okay.
One other thing on EVs, Clifton.
Yes.
I did not get a chance to talk to Becky Oler at the DES today. I'll do that next week. But the 30-day deadline for the right to know request is September 11th.
Oh, good. I do have one other thing to report, which is that the PUC came out with an order in their proceeding, investigative proceeding 2000-004, which was an investigation into rate structure for EV charging. And they basically adopted staff recommendations, which were mostly good. I actually offered a couple of exceptions to those recommendations, and they actually ended up specifically siding with going with my recommendation, which was kind of nice, but was interesting that they sort of called that out specifically in contrast to the staff recommendation. But basically, it was supporting some of the things that we did with Liberty Utilities EV rate and battery charging rate. Although that's at this point just for residential customers, but the nature of their order was to suggest that the other utilities and perhaps Liberty as well should go ahead and think about this for C&I customers as well. And they kind of offered a lot of support for the 3-part time of use rate that we helped Liberty develop, and which Unitil and Eversource were not too happy about, but they said that's the direction that they should be preparing to go in. So it was basically a good order. If there's no questions about that, we'll move on to the next item, City Solar. I think that's a brief update, mostly from Tad.
Folks, I'm gonna have to drop off. I'll be back about 5:30.
Okay. Thanks.
Greg, I will take nominal notes.
I can come back to the recording. That's fine.
Yeah, well, just in case the recording gets glitched or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do nominal.
And, you know, we don't really, it's nice to have the detail on what was discussed, but sometimes you can just say City Solar was briefly discussed.
Yeah. See you soon, Greg.
Bye.
Bye.
What is our quorum, Cliff?
Oh, we still have a quorum. You can drop off too if you need to or want to, since you're on vacation.
Great.
I think
Thanks,
we still have a quorum.
Bye, Megan.
Get less sun, but more fun.
So Tad, just briefly, I know there's been a few emails going back and forth today or yesterday.
Big issue is the interference from the solar optimizers at the landfill maintenance building and also now here at the DPW garage on the handheld radios that are used on 12A by the police department for the landfill site and here by the truck crews for the garage site. There are 2 options. Actually, there's more than 2. There's 3 options for how to deal with this. The panels are now down off of both the police station and the landfill maintenance building because of that interference. While we sort this out, Revision just took those down. One option is the one that is now allowed under code is to use string inverter. No, to use microinverters. which would be one for every 2 panels, like the optimizers. It's expensive. The city would have to cover $20,000 worth of the cost of that. And if it doesn't work and those microinverters create the same kind of problem, then that's the city's responsibility. And we would, according to revision, if we go that way and that happens, we have to deal with it. The other option, and one other thing about the microinverters is that people don't like them. They do not have the robustness and integrity that are generally found in other options.
I like them, and I've had zero problems with them.
No, but with a larger sample size, Clifton, you'd see that there are problems.
Okay.
I like them fine. I haven't had any problems.
Yeah, but people in the industry who install a lot of these end up having to replace some percent of them. And over 20 years, that could end up being a large percent. And since there's one for every 2 panels, that could be a big hassle if the city owns those arrays. So that's one option. The other option is not now allowed under code. It used to be up through the 2017 National Electric Code, and that is to use a string inverter. And so there would be one string inverter, 1 or 2, for these 2 arrays, and they just allow shutoff right there in the building, a switch. The problem is that you shut it off at the inverter, but then the line from the inverter back to the panel is still live whenever the sun is shining. So if the fire department has to go through the roof or vent the roof of that building, they may have to work around a live wire. And so that's the issue. That's why it's no longer code allowed. It is possible to get an exemption from that code. Steve Zubak of Revision and I met with Assistant Chief Libby and Dwayne Elgin this week to lay out these options and appraise them of it and get their opinion on it. They said, please give us detailed descriptions of both options, and we'll get back to you. So Revision is now doing that detailed description of the options and all the pros and cons of each. One thing that Steve did tell me is that they could locate the inverter inside the building right up close to the arrays. So the live wire would not be all that long, but it would cover a portion of the roof. So that's where we stand. If the fire department is okay with this, we'll then go to Win Spencer, the building inspector, and ask him if we can get this exemption. It probably, all in all, ends up being Sean's decision. So we're just working through that, and all this time we're losing production from these solar arrays. Gene, are you back in?
I am. Sorry about that.
Okay,
but on
good.
the plus side, I think I have video now. I do.
Yeah.
We were talking about wires being cut, and apparently someone cut mine.
It's contagious.
Ted,
Oh,
Ted, what is Revision saying about installations on other municipal sites? I mentioned this last time. I see pictures of rooftops with antennas sitting right next to it. What's happening in other municipalities?
Before this problem occurred in Lebanon, they had one other instance of their 7,000 installations of this kind of interference.
So can we look at this from another standpoint? What are we doing wrong? It's a frequency issue? It's some kind of, what is it that's different about Lebanon?
It's a frequency issue. It just happens to be that the optimizers put out a radio frequency noise that is at the same frequency of the antennas that the police use to communicate, and DPW apparently as well. And it's the interference increased with the more work the optimizers were doing. So it wasn't a big problem in the winter. It became a big problem the more output, the more power was flowing through the optimizers. Tad, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, but that's how I understand it. And it was this, the city has a police department has a vendor for its public communication systems, and it was that vendor who was able to identify that the optimizers were putting out this frequency noise. And it's quite possible that other police departments that they have installed near to, or other public safety communication systems, just happen to use a different frequency than the optimizers create interference for. I mean, it's a particular band that they both seem to be in the same radio frequency space.
Can we change the frequency?
We had our radio guy working on this, as well as the telecom company. And Revision has their engineer just like poring over this stuff now. There's no easy solution. I mean, we could move the antennas, but from what I heard, for the police antennas at the landfill, it's $100,000.
And I think the other, I'm guessing the other part of the problem is they have a whole radio system in both vehicles and handhelds that is set up for this particular frequency, and they may not be able to easily change it. It's I don't know if it's a public frequency or if it's a licensed. I think it may be a licensed frequency that the vendor, has for this purpose. I actually don't know about that, but I do know that they have a whole system that's based on this frequency.
Yeah.
And the optimizers aren't tunable to a different frequency in terms of the noise or interference that they create.
And it sounds like they can't be shielded either.
Right.
Easily. And sorry if Tad covered this either last meeting or this. How many panels, and do we have an alternate site we can put them? I think that was discussed a bit as well. Yeah.
There's nothing really at the police station. It's the rooftop. Other parts of that, we had looked at possible tracker sites, but they were where they're going to do the dog training facility, and so there aren't even good alternative tracker sites there. And the same thing at the landfill. We could do without that particular array, but it was a really nice rooftop, and they've already got the racking up there that they've invested in. And the problem is this system's owned by a third party at this point. And I think Revision is probably chafing at the bit for a resolution because their third-party vendor or the third-party owner is losing revenue, and yet they've paid the capital cost for the system.
Every day.
And there's actually nothing in the contracts that really address this. I think Revision is just saying, if you do string inverters, which is the cheapest resolution, we'll pick up the whole tab. Even though they might be able to argue they're not really contractually obligated to do so. And what they've said is, if you want to go with the microinverter route, that's a significant increase in price, and we'll still cover the equivalent of a string inverter. But if that's the only option that we're allowed, or what you prefer, then we'd ask you to pay for the difference between what we're willing to essentially absorb, versus the microinverters.
And it sounds like that would be $20,000.
But in addition to that, Gene and Clifton and John and Woody and Joan, if it turns out that those micro inverters cause the same problem with radio interference, then we would be responsible for taking them off.
I mean, obviously, if fire and the inspector disagrees, won't allow the string inverter option, then we'd want to investigate that before even going ahead with the microinverters to see if we can get assurance from the manufacturer that if we buy the microinverters and they create the interference, that we'll have some recourse. Whether that's possible or not, who knows? But
or find out if we can test them first. The other thing there is, I know, Tad, you mentioned concerns with reliability, long-term reliability of microinverters, but this sounds like it would be a smaller number. It's not like we'd be replacing all of the all of the inverters for all the panels. So there's I think probably a little bit lower risk there in lower numbers of microinverters if we have to go that route.
Well, but eventually all of them would have to be replaced, whether it's 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they're all going to die.
And by that point, the communication system might be upgraded to something that is not subject to such easy interference, which gives me concerns anyway, given, other things being added, on for communications and wireless communications all the time anyway. How new is the existing emergency response system?
Let me address one thing though, before I forget it. Those microinverters are on the undersides of the panels. So you've got an array up there of 200 panels. Some of them are like 3 rows in. So if a microinverter dies in that, getting to that panel to pop it up and replace it, or doing all of them after year 20 is just a royal hassle. And if we had a string inverter, all of that would be avoided.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying if we can't do the string inverter due to fire concerns.
Yeah.
The other thing, but I assume they're all near the antenna where there must be general access anyway, because that's what they're interfering with. So they're, or is that a bad?
Well, the antenna at the police station is actually some distance away, up on a pole that is, I don't know, probably at least 50, if not 100 feet away from the rooftop system.
Really?
Yeah.
Still, wow.
So is it interfering with the antenna itself, or is it basically the wire that's going to the antenna, and is that not shielded properly? I'm sorry, because I mean, if it's that far away, that seems a little strange that it's interfering with that one. And I'm wondering, does basically the wire from the antenna run right past those panels? Just I mean, I'm guessing that all these other folks hopefully ask that question.
Good question. I can't imagine that it does, because the panels are up on top of the roof. And the antenna, the communications is down at least a floor and a half from that, and I'm pretty sure that they're wired to the antenna is underground, because there's nothing overhead between the two. But whereas at DPW, it is a different story. Not DPW, at the landfill, the antenna is right off the end of the roof where the panels are. But they did look at trying to relocate it away from the panels, but apparently that was the conclusion. It would cost a lot of money, because they'd have to put up, right now it's on the building, they have to put up a pole to put the antenna on there. I don't know.
The only interference is at the level of transmission. There's no interference with reception by the individual handsets. For instance, if the police go to Kilton Library, can they still, their walkie-talkies still pick it up?
No, my understanding is that they cannot. The handheld radios cannot receive transmission from that antenna.
No, not from the antenna, but are they going to get interference from the panels at Kilton Library on their handsets? Is it going to be an issue?
Oh, right, because the optimizers are on other buildings.
That's what I mean. Are we going to have now problems pop up? The police realize that it
likely has to
receive, or that
likely has to do with the wavelength, and the antenna is going to be optimized to the wavelength for the transmission. It's a good question to make sure we're not going to have additional issues, but I could see it where it's just causing issues with that equipment, hopefully.
Well, that's an interesting question, because that would be true at the DPW garage.
Exactly.
Is that an antenna there, or is it their handhelds when they're inside the building that aren't working when they used to work?
That.
Interesting. So in that case, it's the handhelds that are being interfered with at the site, because the DPW antenna is up on top of the reservoir that they're talking to. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, if they put PV on top of City Hall with optimizers, does it mean if an officer goes into the Opera House they're going to have interference because of the optimizers on the roof.
I think we need to investigate that.
Yeah. I will ask folks at the PD.
And you know, I guess the parallel question is there any chance of is DPW has a, I thought they were an entirely different wavelength and system than police and fire, because they're not interoperable. They have to call them on the phone if they want to talk to each other between DPW and public safety.
Oh, right.
Which
Yeah.
which is a historical artifact before anybody who's head of these departments or on the city council presently. A couple of decades ago, they decided to go their own ways with communication, which in itself was obviously a bad decision, but it's interesting. Well, I think we've kind of raised a bunch of questions and thoughts for Tad to think about. But
So the third option is to take all those panels down and find some other site on city property to put them up again.
All what panels?
At the land maintenance building and the police station.
Is the problem at DPW sort of not so severe that your boss isn't demanding that those panels be removed as well? Or, I mean, maybe the problem will subside as the production goes down. It'll come and go seasonally. I'm just curious what the DPW thought is now at this point.
So I'm not demanding anything in this regard yet. What I have asked the folks in the garage to do is to track when the problem happens and try to correlate that to how directly the sun is shining on the panels. And so far, they say, yeah, the worst time is in the middle of the day, and after dark is not a problem, or if it's cloudy. So strong correlation there. They said they would track that for a week. A week is up Monday. We'll have another discussion. I have a meeting with Revision at that building on Monday. We're going to look at the antennas that are up on the DPW garage and just see what it would take to move those and whether we think that would solve the problem.
Oh, so they do have antennas on the garage building as well. Okay.
There are 3 on the western wall underneath the solar roof, and then 2 on the wall that faces south, also directly under a solar roof.
Okay. Let's move along. Update on the LED streetlight conversion project. You can be brief about this. The good news is that we got several good proposals, and the one that looks most attractive, the best price package, is well under budget. So that's good news.
Yeah, I spent whatever free time I had this week, which was not much, checking out references. And so far they all check swimmingly well. And I'm talking to, like I talked for an hour today with the head of Streetlight for the city of Boston. And I learned so much from him. It was wonderful.
Oh, good.
And they're just about to start their first smart network, really tiny pilot project. So he was really intrigued with what we're doing and the systems that we are leaning towards and why. And he said, wow, well, there are things that we can learn from you all too. So it's going well. Clifton, I'm going to try to schedule a meeting for Tuesday. Let me know what your availability is.
Okay.
To just hear what I have to say about the references and make a decision.
Yeah, so if a decision's made Tuesday, I think that's why Tad aren't going into more detail, because there is no formal decision yet. But if there is a decision, this will move right along, and we'll start to see some of the work done this fall.
Yep, the earliest that we could see things happening is October. Likely it will spread over 2 years. We can catch 2 years worth of incentives from New Hampshire Saves. That'd be $50,000 each year, so it's a pretty piece of change there. In other news, I was supposed to hear back from Liberty Utilities this week around the list of removal streetlights that we have requested, and I have not heard back from them. So I think they're just dragging their feet. We'll see where that goes very soon.
Okay, let's move along if there's no more questions on that. To Woody and Tad have a little presentation to make on the city's experience with real-time pricing.
You go, Ted.
Okay, so Woody and I have pulled together a couple of spreadsheets here.
Oh, can I just make an introduction on this Wolf Road and
Yes.
the other one? I started out looking at sites that seemed most amenable to solar. And just recently, I started going at it from the other direction, which was to look at sites that were not real heavy users, but, you know, a couple 300, 500 kilowatt hours a month. And I started finding these pumps. And I found two of them, one of which is up on the reservoir road there. There is a pump up there, Cliff, that runs all the time.
Okay.
That pump compensates for lack of the height of the, there's enough gravity force where that reservoir is to serve everything except for the Hillcrest area. So they've got a jockey pump there that runs all the time and is using up several thousand kilowatt hours a month. It's a perfect spot for a tracker. And so also is this Wolf Road pump station. And the Wolf Road pump station does have a pretty good sized lot. I have not been over to see it. I was hoping to grab John and maybe he and I would go there and look at it. The lot runs parallel to Wolf Road. We may have issues with just aesthetics, but the lot's big enough to accommodate. And, you know, I mean, look at that use there. A tracker would put a nice dent in that.
Okay, so those two sites will definitely be added to the next round of solar RFP, if we go with RFP or if we just continue with revision. The other thing that Woody has done is to compile all this data for the water treatment plant, the wastewater plant, City Hall, and the police station. Sort of by month, by account number. This far right column here is solar production. So Clifton, you've been worrying or wondering about whether we are exceeding our production. Here's the kilowatt hour, this column here of usage at the water treatment plant. And these lines here are the solar production.
For those same months.
Yes.
So in terms of the month at the water treatment plant, we are staying under.
No,
I mean, our solar production is less than our total consumption.
no.
Except
May
for
was
May.
this wild anomaly of solar production. So that month was actually greater. By
Which month?
this month.
This May had the highest
Oh, May.
production of solar in the whole time that I've had panels on my roof, 4 years. Records were previously in June and July. This May had more solar production from my roof, and I suspect yours as well, Clifton.
Yeah, my May was it's the strongest month year to date. Yep.
Well, it's showing up on these city sites as well.
So May was over by whatever 10%. All the
But-
rest have been under.
hold on there though. The May bill, if they billed us for 34,000, then maybe the load was that plus the solar. That's what I'm not clear about. I mean, what was May of last year?
And look, interesting, if we look up higher,
So I think if you add the two together, 35 plus 37, it's closer to that 79 from a year ago.
Interesting. Let's cut it in half.
I'm a little confused about these periods, but because you're talking about a year. Are you talking about years?
Here's the 2019, 2020.
Oh, okay. So those are the dates from 9/17. So
Yes.
so from 7/16 to 8/16, that's sort of close. That was 79,000, which is closer to 34 plus 37. That's what I just wanted to understand.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Okay, wonderful.
Water treatment plant?
Yeah, so we're way under then. The water treatment plant could use a whole bunch more solar. If we can find places to put it.
Possibly. Have you gotten the Liberty Utilities bill? Because I'm still a little confused as whether they're doing instantaneous netting or netting over the course of the month.
Yeah, that's what I want to look at too. I couldn't get access to those Liberty bills.
I can get them to you.
Actually, Tad and I went over one, and I got to tell you, I'm confused. I have to look at those some more.
So here's the wastewater plant. Again, these are the months with the solar.
So again, it just tentatively looks like, well, I don't know. That 81,000, I'm still a little confused by this because that 81,400 for March looks like it's a bigger.
That's April.
April. Okay, April. Right. That's a pretty big number, and it seems to be bigger than the typical monthly load from previous years if you add into that the solar. So I still don't understand whether this is somehow gross versus net. But when you look at June, the month of June, it looks like if you add the 58,000 plus 50,000, that's sort of close to the 90,000 for July from the previous year.
If usage went up by 20%.
So is this also showing the delta between the default service versus the real-time pricing?
Well, default is in that one column that ends. You gave me default through. Yeah, that's all the default figures I got. I could use some more default figures from you, Cliff. Remember you gave me that list?
I thought I sent you the whole spreadsheet that has the last decade's worth.
I didn't see that. I'll look for that.
So we're looking at 2020.
What would it be called, Clifton?
Liberty U default energy SVC rates 2008 to 2020. .xls.
No,
where is
I don't see it here.
I'll try to put it right into the folder since it probably, you can't find it. It gets lost in emails.
Great. So in this COL electricity data folder?
Yeah, but go back to the your comparison. Because it looks like for some months, well, this one's pretty good. This one looks like every month it's been under the default service rate.
Yeah, it
And
works
sometimes
great
a
for
lot.
G1 accounts. It does not work for G2 accounts.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So
Well, take a look at the police station and
City Hall.
I assume that's why we went off of real-time pricing there. The only two accounts we've got on real-time pricing are the G1 accounts.
Well, I don't know if that's true at the moment, Tad.
I think it is.
Didn't you give them instruction back in July to switch over accounts other than the solar ones and the small ones, some of the G2 accounts to real-time pricing?
I'm not sure whether we put them on or took them off. Followed there. Oh no, we put them on because they were still expecting electricity rates to be well below average because of the pandemic.
But in this case, you're showing the comparison, but it's been on the default service, so it hasn't been costing us extra.
We got a real-time bill.
For the police station, City Hall?
Yeah, those bills that I'm talking about right there, total bill, we were paying that money, real-time.
But this is 2019.
Oh, I see. Oh. Yep.
Well, they must be from the bill. I mean, you wouldn't know that price otherwise because it's unique to the account.
Yep.
So maybe it was on last summer and fall.
It was. That invoice is a real-time invoice.
And shouldn't have been.
Well, in retrospect, that's true.
Yeah.
I think we need some oversight on this stuff. I had trouble making sense out of when we were on, when we were off. But I just copied down the data I could find.
So this is a project that Wooden's been helping out with enormously. Since I don't have the time to pour over these bills.
So some bills, some sites are doing better on real-time pricing and others are not. So some of these were low, the bills were lower than the cost of the default service.
Yes,
That's correct. All the G1 accounts.
the big ones.
G2 accounts, no.
4.7 cents versus 10.7 cents for our water plant.
And you could actually fill in the lines that you don't have shown. So for instance, maybe we shouldn't do this now, but you've got the April, for instance. In April, the default service rate was 6.7 cents.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that, Cliff. I didn't see any of that stuff. It'll round up. You've got to go. Got to do a little dance here. There you go.
Yeah, and then it's actually at some point it's worth putting the extra digits in. It's actually 6.715 cents, and in May it was down to 5.868 cents. But
Isn't
then
the decimal point in the wrong place? On the line above your decimal point, it's 0.067, not point.
right. Right.
So
In any case,
this doesn't look good for our Lebanon Community Power pilot.
well, it looks good for G1. I mean, there's a lot of savings there every month.
G1 accounts are excluded from our clientele, aren't they? Or I
No.
guess it's opt-in, it could be the G1 people could choose to go.
Right. I mean, the other sort of unique problem we have is that these are based on class average, other than G1, it's based on class average load shape and capacity tag. And so so you have no sort of control over what that average is. I mean, part of the reasons we're saving on these two as much as we are is because of the fact that we lowered our capacity tag. So even there, if you want to throw in June, just real quick, that was 0.05246. So that is a case where we actually ended up spending a little bit more than the default service rate, whereas all the other months it looks like we were under.
Month before last.
Yeah.
Interesting. Still in the pandemic.
Yep.
And well before the annual system peak.
Yep. So if you want to, you could quickly cut and paste or copy and paste those into the water treatment plan as well.
Let's do this another time, Clifton.
Yeah, another time.
Too many.
Okay.
So if
I think
we go ahead with Lebanon Community Power, then we're going to be courting the big, trying to pull the big electric users away from Liberty into our system.
potentially with this particular product, it would be an option. That's very interesting because boy, we did really well in April or May. I should say May. We really beat the price, but actually just a hair over in June. Yeah, but really close. But pretty much every other month beat the price.
The electric car when you plug it in.
Oops, Ted's got a distraction. Well, I think we can move on. Actually, we're kind of eating up our time here. So any other questions on this? But I think, John, your point's well taken. We do need to be monitoring this more closely.
That was Woody.
Yeah. And Woody. Thank you, Woody, for
Well,
working on this.
Who's going to monitor it more closely is my question.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, Clifton, just if you give me 2 minutes, there was a mistake in there that First Point billed the wrong meter for April and May of 2020.
Yeah.
In the water treatment plant, April and May, June's okay, but April and May, the 81,400 and the 69,100, you see that use in April and May? 81,400 got billed to a little wastewater pump down on Reservoir Road, down at the landfill. And May, the 69.1 got billed to a meter on another wastewater pump on 220 Mechanic Street. First,
wow.
I just, I mean, it floored me when I saw that stuff, and I do not know how that stuff gets resolved with the Liberty bill. Tad and I are going to go look at that next, but I uncovered that screw up on First Point, and
wow.
Those aren't G1 accounts, the ones that get billed to. They're G2 accounts, right? I mean, one of those pumps only bills usually about 3 kilowatt hours a month.
That would be G3 then.
The thing doesn't even, run much. But so there's regardless, there's some oversight that needs doing. And I think Shelley is, I'd like to talk with Shelley. I don't know her last name, but I don't want her to think I'm looking over her shoulder, but I would love to know the process by which these bills get reviewed.
Well, but before we leave this, another conclusion that I'm drawing is that we're in no way close to being able to contract for the services that we imagine providing to customers with LCP. The first point is not even close to the track record with the city is terrible. If we were to offer this kind of track record to customers, we'd be a laughing stock. If we're ever, so we haven't got a vendor in the offing that can step in and effectuate actually new Lebanon community power.
In that way, yep.
So we're ways off.
It's fairly eye-opening.
And the other thing about those 2 months that you've got circled there, if you take a look at the real-time price, for those 2 months, it's lower than any, by significantly lower than any other real-time price that I was able to capture. That 3.37, 0.037, closest at 1.048.
That's plausible. ISO New England reported for both those months that it was a record low average real-time price.
Okay.
Yeah, that was,
and the day-ahead prices were also at a record low for those months.
Okay.
Gene, you're gonna say something?
Oh, I was just saying that was right in the middle of the pandemic when everything was really shut down. So that's not too surprising. The real-time pricing would be record lows then, I would think. That was it.
I would have thought use had been way up. Oh, you're saying commercial use was down.
It was down, yeah.
Yeah.
Restaurants are closed, stuff like that.
Yeah, you're right.
Anything else on this before we move on?
Thank you, Woody.
Yeah.
Made my eyeballs twirl, I'll tell you
that. Okay. Speaking of Lebanon Community Power and Community Power New Hampshire, update on that. A lot, not so much specific to Lebanon Community Power, but with regard to Community Power New Hampshire, a lot has been going on. The city, since our last meeting, issued an RFQ, request for qualifications for legal counsel to support the development of Community Power New Hampshire, as well as Lebanon Community Power and other municipal aggregation programs. There's an active governance working group, is what it's called, and there's an active CPNH organizing group. So one's called the organizing group and the other is called the governance working group. There's a fair amount of overlap between the two, but the governance group in particular has been led by Rod Bouchard, who's Assistant Director of Sullivan County, and Julia Griffin, who's the Hanover Town Manager. But Tad's also been attending, myself on behalf of Lebanon, a woman, Doria Brown from Nashua, City of Nashua, as well as some other folks. Henry Herndon from Clean Energy New Hampshire has been putting a lot of effort into this. We did, this was done closely in coordination with Sean Mulholland, our city manager. We had a pretty short turnaround on that whole package, but we got six responsible or six solid proposals. So we narrowed that down to 3 that we've interviewed, and we are currently negotiating with one of them for terms of engagement. I can't really say much more than that, except that we had some really good options. And we're the City of Lebanon and the Town of Hanover have committed some funds for to support these initial legal services. Our major goal, and it's described in the RFQ, is to get to the point where we have essentially a joint powers agreement, a joint action agreement, which is pursuant to an RSA to support the launch of community power aggregations, as well as articles of bylaws and articles of incorporation, so that we can actually stand up community power in New Hampshire and potentially transition the law firm to having community power New Hampshire as a client instead of a small grouping of subdivisions of the state. And, you know, there's this draft aggregation plan template, which I haven't even had a chance to look at yet. But you know, sort of the next thing we were talking about today in the governance group is starting to develop what is essentially a business plan for community power in New Hampshire, as well as the local template, but also laying the groundwork for a broader solicitation for the really support services to help support multiple community power launches in terms of vendors who can provide both procurement support, risk management, sort of the back office services. And I think, you know, counties, so it's really valuable that Cheshire County's involved. The counties and cities have flexibility as to when they approve plans and can launch. So I think we're sort of hoping that we can get enough initial volume with a launch, and on an opt-out basis, the opt-out product would necessarily have a known fixed price. It wouldn't be the, you know, like a real-time pricing product. You know, sometime, hopefully in the first half of next year, in such a way that we can actually create sort of a cash flow and some momentum. Hanover wants to get this queued up so they can approve it on their next town meeting, which they don't meet normally until May, so that wouldn't be until May of next year. But Henry Herndon has queued up a lot of interest by a lot of other communities in the state. And so there's about, you know, somewhere approaching a dozen communities that are interested in possibly joining in with Community Power New Hampshire, perhaps sooner than later. So we're trying to get some, you know, documents, some draft documents, which is why we concluded we really needed legal support for this next stage. So that we have a robust set of documents that we could actually have a bunch of communities join in and be represented on an initial board of directors. So that's sort of where things are going, and partially why I haven't actually called an aggregation subcommittee yet, just because Tad and I and others have been up to our eyeballs with both, you know, implementing the street lighting RFP, but with all this other works going on, which maybe I'm going to segue right into the next two agenda items just to give the full brief, and then I'll pause for questions and comments and people telling me I'm nuts. So the PUC rulemaking, we spent 3 hours immediately before this meeting looking at draft. The first staff draft proposal. This is still in an informal stage. They haven't formally initiated rulemaking, which they'll do when they put out a draft, an initial proposal. There are, you know, generally speaking, the draft staffed rules drew heavily from the draft rules that I drafted, with input from other sort of coalition members. that we put out at the beginning of the process, which actually kicked off way back before the shutdown. So that must have been in February or early March. There was a pretty robust conversation. There is a good portion of the rules that is in good shape. There is some very problematic areas, not the least of which was a proposal by the staff that would require prior to launch 60 days advance written notice after you have an approved aggregation plan ahead of the issuance of the RFP for the next default service supply, which would mean if we wanted to launch before August of next year, we would have to be notifying the utility that we have an approved aggregation plan by the end of this month. So, you know, part of what our message was, as well as a couple of the competitive supplier that was on the call, was that this is totally anti-competitive, totally anti-market oriented. They want us to conform quite tightly to the regulatory procurement schedule for utility provided default service. And we don't think that's what the intention of the legislation was or what works from a practical point of view. So there was a lot of discussion about that. Eversource wants to be even more constrictive. They want to mandate that you have a 45-day window at the start of this default service period in which to launch. And they would like to say that you actually have to launch once you've given notice. So what they want to say is you have to go out and lock in your prices before we lock in our prices. And you have to live with those and launch, whether that's more or less than the default utility provided default service price. So even the staff wasn't buying that one, but they went ahead and said that that's what they were going to counter propose on that. So, you know, in terms of this question of moving ahead with Lebanon Community Power, we still have some groundwork to do on the rules, and it's conceivable that we may have to go back in at the start of the next session to get additional legislative changes. But there was a lot that was shared, and the other piece that's going on is this. Well, the grid mod, and I think I reported on this at the last meeting that. There's a lot of overlap with grid mod and what we're trying to do with the community power aggregation movement. But the PUC ended up suspending its order on grid mod, which was very customer and market friendly. The Consumer Advocate and Clean Energy New Hampshire and we were all very feeling very good about the PUC's grid mod order. But again, Eversource didn't like it. So they issued on the very last day that they could have a motion for rehearing, for reconsideration, and asked the commission to suspend their order. The commission essentially had to suspend their order while there's this pending motion for reconsideration. The Consumer Advocate drafted a very strong motion to oppose that on, I think, really firm legal ground. And I was able to join in on behalf of the City of Lebanon. So the City of Lebanon was also a party to the Consumer Advocate's objection to the motion for rehearing. But in the meantime, that's suspended. So the focus is turned to the data platform, which there was talk about possible settlement back towards the end of June. It became apparent that settlement would not occur because of some basic gaps between the utilities and everyone else, but particularly the Consumer Advocate, even though we'd found a significant amount of common ground from where we were 6 months ago. But the long and short of it was that everybody agreed we needed to go ahead and file the direct testimony. So that was originally due last week, but last Wednesday, but because the Consumer Advocate the day before it was due put in a request to extend the deadline till this past Monday. We joined in that request, in large part based on the fact that Professor Amaro Farid, who's sort of our technical advisor and had already done a lot of work on a lot of issues around how this data platform should be developed and implemented, because he actually teaches the subject at the Thayer School of Engineering and also in the Department of Computer Science at Dartmouth, where he's an adjunct professor. And the long and short, well, he had a power outage from the previous week's storm outage. He was without power for more than 3 days as an Eversource customer. And then on top of that, he was out of internet connection at his home, which is where both he and his wife, who's also a professor, work from, and have been working from since March, with several small children in the household. And they lost their internet communication for almost a full week, for actually it turned out to be more than 6 full days. And we pointed that out in our request for an extension of time. The commission, at like an hour and 20 minutes before the filing deadline last Wednesday, granted the request for an extension, and actually cited our power outage reason as the primary reason they were granting it, because there's no way Amaro was going to get anything written on paper by the deadline. And the rest of us were trying to get our testimony finished, but my testimony, which kind of tied together everyone else's, kind of depended on seeing everyone else's testimony and filling in some gaps. The long and short of that is I managed to barely timely file with less than a minute left on the clock. And so our testimony, collective testimony, did get posted on the PU website as timely filed. Although when I looked at it, I realized that I didn't put the page numbers in the index to Amaro's extensive attachments, and didn't put the proper headers on. So I submitted that later on Monday evening. And they've also posted that, although dated the next day. But the real point was the actual testimony, which didn't change, was timely filed. And the consumer advocate told Samuel Golding that it was the best testimony he's ever seen on the issue of the state of competition and market structure in New Hampshire. He did an outstanding job, and Amaro did an even more amazing job, very authoritatively citing really firm grounds for our position versus the utilities, in essence. And it's outstanding, true expert witness testimony on both of their parts. And it was strengthened by April Salas, Kat McGee, who's a state representative, who has had an entire life career of project management for complex IT projects, and my own testimony that was the only one that didn't get proofread, because I was proofreading everybody else's testimony up until the last minute. So there's a few typos in it, but I feel really good about the package of testimony. I think and I urge people to look at it. I'll send you out the link to it. I'm not going to send the actual documents because I had to send it in 3 parts because it totaled more than 50 megabytes of material. Amaro decided to attach their entire book that was commissioned by the Electric Power Research Institute on the Energy Internet of Things. And really, the intro to his testimony talks really nicely about this whole concept of a shared integrated grid and how community power aggregations are the perfect vehicle to actually realize this vision, which is essentially the vision of New Hampshire's restructuring statute and the findings that the legislature made in support of the data platform. And we really talk about how the data platform is ultimately really central to realizing the opportunities that we have to accelerate the integration of distributed energy resources, the transition to a decarbonized renewable energy future, and the democratization of all of these policies and issues, which are far from democratized now. They're still very much under monopoly and regulatory control that is moving like a dinosaur, in the face of extinction from climate change and global warming. And we quoted some really good authoritative additional sources on that particular topic, which I urge you to read, particularly Ahmad Fariqi's recent article in a magazine called Regulation. But in any case, I'm getting really obscure, and I'll stop jabbering right at that point and just say that a lot of work has been going on, even though I haven't been able to engage most of this committee in this work effort. We're making progress. We still got a ways to go. Any questions? Thank you.
Clifton, what's the timeline for the PUC on the rulemaking session?
They just asked for folks to provide written comment around the discussions that occurred today by the end of the month. And they hope to convene another informal stakeholder discussion. Well, actually, they hope to maybe turn around another draft set of rules. There were a few things that came up that various parties suggested that there was actually that were new to the commission staff, but there was actually agreement on between the utilities and us and the competitive suppliers and aggregators that were on the call. So it's like, okay, that's good. This is a new idea that we all seem to like. So there are a few of those. The long and short of that was they want to try to see if we can, and they urge folks, particularly us and the utilities. By us, I mean myself, Henry, Samuel, who are the three of us who are really speaking for community power aggregation on the call, to try to work through some of the really big contentious issues, which we're going to give a try at. It's possible that, like on the data platform, we've come to loggerheads, and we may have to look to the legislature to break the logjam. And I'm guardedly optimistic that we can do that regardless of who's elected governor. I think we're going to have strong majorities in the House and Senate that we can work with on a bipartisan basis on these issues. And even the current governor is very, he's interested in these ideas because they're more about invigorating a market than sort of command and control decision making, and he likes the idea of markets and empowering customer choice. So that is the frame where we've gotten support from the governor's energy policy advisor in advancing community power aggregation. And some of and Senate Bill 166, which was related to that, people, the utilities were really taken back because they didn't think the governor was going to sign that, because almost no Republicans voted for it in the House or Senate. But it's the governor still signed it into law. So they could see the case for that. So. And even some Democrats called me up and said, "How did you do that when none of our other bills got through?" So that's created some doors with some of our nominal allies who actually ended up slowing down some of the legislation we would have liked to have seen. Because they got suspicious of it because the governor supported it. And it's like, no, this is a good thing that the governor's supporting it. And it's also being sponsored by Dan Feltes, who's running against the governor in the Senate. Maybe this is a good thing if people on both sides are agreeing to it. But we ran into an obstacle on the House side with the committee leadership. But one of those people reached out to me and said, let's figure out how to work together because I think you're onto something. So that's the good news.
In the PUC rule for community power aggregation, are you protecting the Lebanon's pilot of opt-in?
Yeah, specifically today, Eversource's person who deals with aggregations in Massachusetts said, oh, the way we're set up in Massachusetts, you can only have one supplier or load serving entity per aggregation. And we think that's the way it ought to be in New Hampshire, because the rule's written that we can have more than one competitive supplier or more than, and we could be our own load serving entity and using competitive suppliers for different products. And I really had to push back on that. I said, excuse me, every default service utility provided default service procurement allows the possibility of at least 2 separate competitive suppliers, because they bid out small customers and large customers separately, and often different suppliers win the different bids. So it's like, why is that okay for the utility provided default service, but not for community power default service? And then I pointed out that on top of that, historically, some of the default services, you actually laddered. There was a Unitil used to ladder their procurement. Liberty used to ladder their service so that they would bid out part of the load at one point and another part at a different point, and different competitive suppliers. They might have 3 or 4 different competitive suppliers supplying the same customer class. And again, I said, why is that okay for the utilities, but not for us? And then I said, third of all, we might want to offer opt-in products, like might want to offer access to hourly day ahead or real-time pricing. And we might want to do that as a load serving entity, whereas our fixed price opt-out product is through a competitive supplier. And actually, Liberty somewhat joined in and said, we're not sure we see why that would be a problem. We think we could do that. We have a guest, Laura Stavis, who's looking to join us. Hi, Laurel. Have you just joined us?
Yeah.
This is the Lebanon. Oh, you may have to mute because we're getting feedback.
Laurel, could you mute? There you go.
You might have both phone and computer on at the same time or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is the LEAC meeting you've joined. You're welcome.
I'm supposed to be at a different meeting, and
okay.
I was sent the link, and it's the link to your meeting, Cliff. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here.
That's okay. It's a public meeting, so you can be here, but this is not where you want to be, I think is the point.
You need to find a way to get to the other meeting. So nice to see you all.
So go to LebanonNH.gov/live to find it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so that's that.
I think Laurel's looking for the CIP committee.
Oh, right, just started 5 minutes ago.
5:30, yeah.
Oh, and Joan, one thing, this is actually when we get to other, I have a really quick report relative to the planning board. But first I want, if anybody has questions or wants to tell me to go on vacation or anything like that, now's the time. I'm happy to answer questions anytime about this if anybody is interested. It's just there's a lot there, I realize.
So briefly, comprehensively, what do you think the outlook for the data collection, data sharing is? You said you think it's problematic because of opposition from Eversource.
Well, the main opposition, I mean, we've kind of agreed to some of the basic structural elements to the data platform. The big difference, there's 2 big differences at this point. One is governance. The utilities want to just be able to do this on their own with a minimum of oversight. And part of that is that they want to sort of constrain the data platform to as little data as possible. I mean, they basically agreed, yes, customer data will do that, but we don't understand the need for system data or any kind of market or transactional data. And this is where Amro's testimony is really important because the Electric Power Research Institute, that, you know, we start off by quoting and citing the CEO of the Electric Power Research Institute, which is supported by most of the investor-owned utilities in this country. That's the primary funding source. And they're considered like the premier entity. It's them that are saying we need a data platform that ties together customer information, system data, and transactional data. That's what you need for the grid of the future. That's what you need for grid modernization. This is a fundamental building block. And the legislature said it in their findings. They said this is fundamental to all these proceedings and dockets and this vision that the legislature has articulated into law. And the utilities were like, no, we just do consumer data and we're never going to share system data. But it's the Electric Power Research Institute that's saying you got to do system data. And it's also the PUC in their grid mod order that's saying we got to make system data more transparent. You got to have system data if you're going to accelerate the integration, cost-effective integration of renewables at the distribution system level. ISO New England provides a lot of system data through open but secure APIs. And we're saying we need to do that same thing at the distribution level. And I haven't even read all the other testimony, but I think, you know, there's a lot of other supportive testimony in that regard. But I will add that Liberty actually, even though the PUC ordered that the joint utilities operated on a consolidated basis, Eversource and Unitil filed their testimony and said Liberty is not joining us in this testimony. They're going to do their own. And Liberty kind of came out and said, well, we actually embrace this consumer customer centric model which is what EPRI's talking about with the shared integrated grid. So they took a somewhat softer position towards being more open. And they've actually already shared a lot of their system topography, for instance. They've already gone and shared that with the city of Lebanon, albeit under a non-disclosure agreement. But at least Mark Goodwin actually has this GIS layer now, although he can't share it publicly. But they also shared it with Amro Fareed in terms of a collaborative project to develop a transactive energy platform that can work at the distribution system level. So the good thing is that I think Liberty they've got more the right mindset. Unitil's actually saying, you know, we actually believe in this same idea. We just think the utility should do it all. I don't know. That's not really what they're saying. I'm oversimplifying, but that's really what Eversource is saying. They're saying, why do we need time of use rates when we can just do load management ourselves directly? It's like, no, that's not the New Hampshire paradigm. The legislature said 24 years ago that we should use competition and market-based structures instead of the kind of command and control utility regulated decisions, which often end up with wrong decisions. And you know, so there's a lot of stuff going on, but part of it is they're just, Eversource in particular is set in its ways. And I might add, there's a minor revolution going on in Connecticut because they had such poor performance on their storm recovery damage recently. And actually, I will send everybody this link. Samuel co-authored a column in Connecticut that sort of set forth in summary form what he said in his testimony. He co-authored it with a Connecticut-based clean energy advocate who's working to sort of organize, trying to develop the momentum for community power aggregations in Connecticut. And I think the chair of the Energy Committee in the Connecticut legislature reached out specifically to Samuel and said, this is fantastic. You are saying what we've all been thinking. I'm going to share this with everybody on our legislative policy committee, and we're going to really talk about doing what you're talking about. So, like you said, if Eversource didn't hate him already, they probably do now, because this whole community power aggregation is threatening them on their home territory in Connecticut, where there's been growing displeasure by both regulators and the public with Eversource's performance and obstructionist attitude towards change, basically. But so many more people are starting to realize we've got to accelerate change in the electric grid if we're going to achieve any of these decarbonization goals. So that's the long and short of it. We're pushing for change, and what we're doing is getting some recognition, but we're just not there yet. I continue. I even though I've been involved with this for 25, well, close to 30 years now, directly, it still amazes me at how time-consuming and difficult some of this is to get to where we need to go. But we're making headway, and more people are joining in our effort and wanting to support it. So that's the good news. We're finding a lot of resonance across the state, and to some extent now in Connecticut as well, that this is something that we need to make happen.
Clifton, can I follow up on that with my EFM report?
Yes.
So I'm going to start by sharing something that directly relates to this. I've been participating in a leadership training with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. It's sort of left brain leadership, and they've asked us to do something called forensic mapping, which is you take a project and you chart it in terms of over time on the x-axis, and the y-axis is sort of elements of success. And I chose Lebanon Community Power / Community Power New Hampshire to do this with. The circles here are points of what they call emotional work. And I put the 23-year period between 1995 and 2017, 2018 as a period of protracted emotional work. And then sort of an upward trend since right before I got here with the formation of Lebanon Community Power, then a big downward swoop when the utilities decide they're going to dig in their heels, and then gathering momentum since then with the ongoing development of Community Power in New Hampshire, different work by our aggregation committee, the grant that came in, support from the Office of Consumer Advocate, and then sort of projecting out into the future. So very interesting exercise. Below the x-axis, they asked us to put the different elements or different events in this time frame into one of two categories, what they call the hierarchical category, sort of the top-down command and control, or the adaptive, which is more of a left brain collaborative type of creativity and work. And so I took all of these elements and divided them up, with the ones on the top row being the adaptive, the one on the bottom row being the hierarchical, and the ones in the middle being both. Don't need to get into this more right now because we don't have a whole lot of time, but very interesting process to go through to analyze a project in this way and look at the inflection points in it, what caused them, and think through how to negotiate those better in the future. The emotional work aspects of it or events. So there's that. Now, other things I want to touch on briefly. Sustainable Lebanon was approached by a man named Dean Berg, who's forming or creating a handheld cell phone app to help people to assess their carbon footprint around their home. And he wants this to be something that anybody can use, very simple to use, and people gain points from doing it. Then those points to be redeemed at a community of green businesses in the location. Very exciting project. I'm plugging in, folks with the Vital Communities are plugging in, Vermont Law School, trying to get the co-ops involved. I've sat in with Sustainable Hanover and asked them to hear a presentation by this guy. Hopefully we can hear at Sustainable Lebanon sometime soon also. John has been involved in those meetings and can talk more about them. He is looking for a pilot project and thinks the Upper Valley would be a beautiful place to do that. To just get this thing launched and do some assessment for how well it works. One of the aspects of it is that as people register their footprint reduction commitments, that can be summarized so that we know on a municipal level what our carbon footprint reduction is. Very valuable information because we have no other way to get that. Looks like Greg is back. Hey, Greg. So that is in the works. We'll probably be hearing a lot more about that. I did sit in on the Sustainable Hanover's Energy Committee meeting. They are launching a window dressers campaign, and they're looking for other towns to go in with them on that.
What's that mean?
It's happening. Well, the Norwich Congregational Church. Someone from that church approached them and said, we want other towns to partner with us. And the Hanover Energy Committee said, yes, we would like to. So they are pulling together the volunteers to try to make that happen. There may be an opportunity for LEAC or Sustainable Lebanon to also bring people to that project or expand it into Lebanon.
What is it? What is window dressers?
We had the presentation from the woman. It's where this nonprofit group makes these window inserts.
Yes, gotcha.
Oh, okay. It's the essentially the interior storm window.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so similar, I think Covered has been pitching a project like this for a while as well. So it sounds like hopefully they're involved.
Who's pitching it, Gene?
Cover Home Repair has I know they've tried to actually have this type of thing designed, like in an improved version. I'm not sure if it was with window dressers or not, but I have. I've seen them. So I've seen the ED talk about it in the past. So certainly someone who, or an organization that should be involved with anything going on as well. Or it seems like it would make sense. They'd be a good partner.
The window dressers is highly structured. Every step of the way, the actual making of the window inserts has to be preceded by months of structured communication with window dressers. So I'm sure they wouldn't be open to any modification of their design or their process.
So anyway, that is happening. I forget what the name of the woman was who approached us, who wanted to do it
Amelia Serene.
Amelia Serene.
Does someone want to reach out to her and tell her that Hanover and Norwich are doing this, and it might be possible to sort of split up the work and the organizing?
Piggyback.
Yes.
She never offered to do the organizing. She was coming to us looking for somebody to make it's a major commitment to be the organizer of one of these projects. I'm not sure I would do it. For a couple of months, it's almost full time.
Okay, if I'd forgotten what she was offering to do or not do. I didn't know if she had other towns that were involved, that she might be more inclined to take on that role or not.
Not at all. She was coming to us looking for somebody on LEAC to take on that role.
Okay. Their Solarize program, I guess it's their third round of Solarize in Hanover. Greg, you might know better. But they've got 40 households signed up. Yeah.
It's good.
Impressive. Report on the City Hall. The money to insulate the interior walls of the Opera House has been approved by the city manager, so that is going forward. We're doing a change order for that with REARC. Very exciting. I still have it on my plate to crunch the numbers for the thermal energy storage to see if that pans out. I'm guessing it's not going to with the cost that we got from REARC and their engineer for the capital cost of that project. But I need to track down some of those numbers and where they came from to confirm them or refute them.
I'd be interested in seeing those numbers, what they put together, Ted.
Yeah, I'd like to work with you on that, Clifton, when you and I have some breathing room.
Yeah.
I am working now to get a dedicated solar monitor installed in the waiting area for the city clerk's office. There's going to be a seating area there now with a big monitor that just scrolls through different city news. This will be a dedicated monitor that just gives the solar reporting. So I am tracking down data cables and power outlets and making sure that those are all installed properly, and talked with the IT manager today about that. Also, I have proposed, though Sean has not really embraced this warmly yet, I proposed that food scraps generated in City Hall be composted in a worm bin in the basement.
My son is doing that. It has 3 Rubbermaid tubs in his basement with worm farms, and it's actually the worms are actually a little bit sensitive. If they don't like the conditions in the bins, they crawl out of the bins and start migrating.
Interesting.
It's really wonderful, but they don't like, for instance, citrus peels. There's certain things once you have a feel for it, it flies along and generates wonderfully rich compost.
Yeah. Yeah, gardeners love worm casting. It's like the best compost. So I proposed that. I think it'd be a wonderful sort of talking point, something to do little tours on. We could probably get Pat McGovern involved. Anyway, so that's a fun little project I and Rebecca and Rich Adams are working on. Wonderful op-ed came out in the paper today. I sent it to people. Thanks to Clifton for forwarding it. Just a letter that's the guy from Winooski or somewhere, Essex Junction, wrote to Clifton saying he'd picked up news on the a news feed he's got about EV charging stations being installed, and heard that Lebanon has gotten nixed by Electrify America. And he wrote this beautiful letter saying, hey, just want to let you all know what you're about to lose out on by not having that charger station.
So who got it to the Valley News?
I recommended that he send it to the Valley News, and they printed it as an op-ed.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was saying how, well, Tad, you sent us a copy of it.
Yes.
So it's in the recent email from Tad that had 3 enclosures, and that was one of them.
Yep.
And the thing that he kept pointing out in this letter was how he has to, he would really love it because where he has to go now, it's pushes his limit is really far in his car, and that he knows a lot of people because he's going from Burlington, Vermont to Boston and that area, and to be able to stop in Lebanon would be a perfect place for it. And he also said that where he stops now is, where was it again, Todd, where he stops?
Berlin, Vermont, on the western side of the Green Mountains, and then way down
in the mall in
Rockingham Park.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nashua.
And he was
Salem
saying
or
how,
Nashua.
yeah, and he was saying how, of course, he shops there. And what I was thinking when I read it, because he really laid out the argument very, very nicely and gave a lot of good information. It was an excellent letter, short and sweet. And what I was thinking, what was that it seemed to me that it would be a lot easier for someone passing through to deal with Lebanon than to have to deal with the Rockingham Mall. If that's the one that I'm thinking of. I mean, it's big and it's probably half empty now. It's like stopping at a big dinosaur, and I mean, it's so much friendlier to be able to come to Lebanon and have your choice of, instead of having your choice of a food mall and these big stores, you know, it's just a nice, much nicer place. And you could even, you know, hang out on the green or hang out in the library. I mean, everything is right there in town. So.
And the Berlin stop is nothing to write home about either. So it's a large urban gas station with a convenience store, and next door to that there's 8 Tesla superchargers and 4 or 5 EV Go stations. Also in the parking lot of a Comfort Inn. So there's not much to do there.
And that must be out of the way, because I've been to Burlington a million times and I don't even remember it going through Berlin, Vermont.
It's right off the highway. It's that new rest area, exit 7 or 8, I think.
It's right by Montpelier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read that letter also, and it made me wonder why we aren't looking at a 12A spot for our project as well.
Well, they already were. They have identified some other spot. I don't know if it's Hannaford's or Target or somewhere that they said we have a fallback. So
they're going to do one in this general area. We don't know where.
Hannaford's may actually be high on their list. Hannaford's has put fast chargers at a number of locations already.
Well, that's certainly easy on, easy off, unless it's Christmas.
Or it could be Walmart, because they've done them in Walmart parking lots as well.
They've done Walmarts.
Yeah. So aside from everything that's in my report that you all got, I don't have anything else.
Did you have something, Cliff, that you wanted to specifically?
Under other and open to the public, I just wanted to mention that I did present to the Site Plan Regulation Subcommittee of the Planning Board about the idea of writing into our site plan regulations that outdoor lighting be 3,000 K or warmer. And it was very well received. And I don't know if they've reported back to the full planning board yet, but hopefully that will move along.
Probably Monday night.
Okay. But the committee had a thorough discussion and was unanimous in supporting that.
And ironically, we had just bought 6 lights for our own house, which we didn't have down facing, and I've hated for years. And so we finally, and as I was telling Cliff, I didn't even realize about the warmth, even though it's been talked at this committee, and shame on me. But on the side of the box, we did select a style that had has a like a triangular, so it down with just out, to cover our steps and our deck. And on the box, it had all the statistics, and there it was, explaining the warmth and the warm red and the blue, cool blue, and what the numbers were. And Cliff had originally wanted, was it 2,700?
Or 3,000 or warmer. Yep.
And what was available at the store was 3. So we decided that was, there's no point in us as a planning board asking applicants to do something that is impossible for them to find to buy. So we knew that that's available because we just bought them at Walmart. It was Home Depot. And I hate that store. I hate going in there. But the alternative was, shop till I dropped, which I didn't want to do. And they were very reasonable. They were like $50 each. And to find out, and they're the special lights that don't look like lights, which I don't know what you call them, Cliff. But so they're perfect, and they're inexpensive, and they look really nice. And I wish we could do something to stop the residential, because we on the planning board, we can control the restaurants, and we control multifamily housing and office buildings. But we have no jurisdiction over single-family residences, and there's so many of them that are just spewing light with these hideous lights that just shine like ours were, that shine light in every single direction. And we'll be losing the Milky Way, which is my nephew. I guess I have to throw this in. He's just turned 13, and he's just started backpacking out in Portland, Oregon. And he loves it. It's like one of the first things that he really, really loves. And on his second backpacking trip this weekend in Oregon, climbing on the Middle Sister, of the Three Sisters volcanoes, he saw the Milky Way for the first time, and he was so excited about it. So these things are really important. What you were saying, Cliff, I want to give you a lot of kudos for taking all these years and dealing with all this resistance and skullduggery to just keep saying no. You know, to be receiving that message, saying no, and saying, no, we're going to do this. We're going to do it from this way, or we're going to do it from this way, or we're going to come in the back door, but we're going to do it. So kudos to you, Cliff.
Thanks.
That's what we're up against.
Anything else anybody would like to bring up?
I have a picture to share.
Shoot.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. And we do have future agenda items. We do want to get back to the building codes update and city procurement policy, but we'll get to that in the fall.
What a pretty picture.
It is. It's
Nice.
so orderly and neat. I'm impressed. You know, sometimes they make a mess. They make a rat's nest, but you know, that was nicely done.
So I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but
Yep.
Yes.
okay, so the 2 Tesla boxes are new, as is the wiring, these 3 wires. This is the input feed from the meter that used to go directly in here.
That's the
And-
fuse box, right?
Right, this is my main breaker box. And so this box is the big relay that switches back and forth between utility power or battery power. It measures the amount of solar coming in and adjusts the charge rate of the batteries to not overdraw, only, you know, to consume the solar, but not pull. That's how they control it, to not pull from the utility grid. There's actually 2 batteries here. You can sort of see the gap behind them,
Ah, okay.
one behind the other. And there's
Cool.
a piece of plastic trim that goes around it.
Cool. Cliff, Greg, can you tell us again all that stuff you were telling us before, you know, about the, I followed it all and I listened to it all, but I didn't understand it. And this is really a joke because you spent a long, long time, but that's exactly what Greg is just, I mean, isn't that related to what Greg is saying? You don't follow what I mean.
Well, I'm
Who
not.
talked to Joan?
Well, while you were gone, Cliff gave us a very, very long and detailed description about a lot of what you were just talking about. not
Oh,
what-
the distributed energy resources. It was a little different.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, the battery, the Liberty time of use rate for that. But yeah, so Greg's is onto that nice time of use rate now, or should be shortly.
Yeah, they're actually going to backdate me. There was some issues with my billing and not crediting me for net meter generation for May and June, and they're actually the analyst did some work on my bill and said, oh, it's going to be cheaper to just put him on net meter on the time of use rate back from May. So they're actually pushing me back and making me effective on May 1, where the rate was officially offered, and then recalculating my bill, and I'll come up with some ridiculous savings.
See what I mean? He's doing the same thing that you guys were talking about, but yours was multi-levels.
Yes. This is how it plays out in a single home. Yes.
Right.
So
Simpler.
the way this appears to be working ways it appears that it will work is it charges during the morning during the mid-peak rate, charges enough to then power the house in the afternoon during the 3 to 8 p.m. and then I run off the grid. And after 8 p.m. the battery shuts down and goes into standby, and I run off the cheap rate of 8 cents a kilowatt or 6 cents a kilowatt hour.
But the afternoons when you should be getting a lot of the solar, so wouldn't your house be really drawing very little then?
Yeah, so what it actually appears to do is to, in that expensive rate period, 3 to 8 p.m., it runs the house entirely off the battery and exports all the solar to the grid to maximize my my return on
His revenue. He's going to end up maybe getting paid by the utility.
So it's going to be interesting to see how all these numbers work out in the end. But
We didn't hear what you said, Woody, because you were muted. You're still
So-
muted.
That's what John wanted to do, was arbitrage, right?
Yeah, you can't manually control it, so you couldn't, for instance, have set it up to charge at night and then force it to discharge
Right.
during the peak period. But it does a pretty good job of essentially doing that.
Yeah, great.
It won't dump the battery to the grid during the peak period except when Liberty commands it to. So the house will never export energy out of the battery under normal circumstances.
But that's something we'll try to enable with Lebanon Community Power.
Right.
Next step. Well, okay. I think we're over time here, and Jean's got to go. So maybe we can wrap up, and if nobody has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Are we next
moved.
meeting Thursday, September 17th?
Yes.
And did someone say something about the future agenda items?
Well, just that we know that we want to get back to building code updates. That sort of necessarily involves the
Okay.
planning department folks and city procurement policy, which is generally been on hold since late last year when the city manager and I were last working on it. But we'll get back to that at some point. John?
I don't want to take a lot of time about it, but is there a quick update on what's happening with the gas to energy project at the landfill?
Just a little bit. I think there was a little bit of an impasse with regard to Liberty's and their consultants' position on what upgrades were necessary, and the engineers for the city. And Liberty came back and said, well, maybe we would buy the gas from you to turn it into renewable natural gas that we could sell to Novo Nordisk and others like them. Forget the pipeline. We're obviously not doing the pipeline in Lebanon, and so right now, from what I understand, that they're still waiting for some proposal back from Liberty to compare against the system upgrades to enable the electricity production instead.
So Liberty gets to be on both sides of that equation. They can up their prices to prevent us from doing up their upgrade prices to prevent us from doing gas to energy ourselves, and then they can then they can make an offer to buy the gas. That's a little bit of a bad
These guys have been doing this a while, you know.
That's how it looks.
I'm alarmed by that because the utilities all over the country are offering renewable natural gas as their path to carbon reduction, and it's just greenwashing. It's not it's not a real strategy.
I can say this because it's public knowledge. When Novo Nordisk was saying, they told us that their claim for this plant in Lebanon and all of their plants all over the world, what they're going to be, was it net zero? And that, everything was going to be very ecologically sensitive and wonderful. And then I asked them, I said, and yet you're going to burn, the natural gas. And I said, yet that's the one where if it leaks, it goes up into the ozone layer and destroys the ozone layer. And so I asked them if they were planning it to be a bridge process and not permanent. And they kind of went,
yeah.
More of that.
This is a discussion that we could queue up for the next meeting, maybe. I don't really think we have time to go into it now, but the same is somewhat true. It's not really the ozone layer. It's just the fact that methane gas, whether it's renewable or not, is or natural sourced or caused because humans are causing it to be released into the air. It's just a very, very potent greenhouse gas, like 86 times or 84 times CO2. And so it accelerates global warming. but we
No,
well,
ridiculous.
that's not entirely true. I mean, we would call it green if we made electricity from it at the landfill, because it is made from within our within my lifespan, mostly organic sources. It is essentially renewable recent growth, whether it's
Right.
cotton fibers and clothing or
Right.
paper products or whatever.
Versus dug out of the ground.
Right, that's degrading. It's not fossil energy. It's not fossil fuel.
Right.
It is within the past 100 years or so
Right.
that's
But splitting
decomposing
hairs.
anaerobically. And if it leaks from the landfill, it has the same potency as if it leaks from a truck.
Right.
And some of it does leak at the landfill. The city's trying to collect as much as it can, as efficiently as it can, but it's just flaring it right now. So whether that gets burned to make electricity that does qualify as renewable electricity, or whether it gets burned to heat buildings in Lebanon, it is coming. It's not a fossil fuel. But I don't disagree that this can also be used as a greenwashing technique. And that there's really not that much of it to go around. It's not really a path in terms of filling their gas pipelines. You know, what Lebanon might produce, you know, might actually help heat a number of buildings in Lebanon, but it's nothing. Just like from the electricity point of view, it would help, but it's nowhere near close to what we even consume here in Lebanon for electricity. It's just part of the puzzle.
Is there a chance that something will happen before our September meeting when we might discuss this?
I don't think so. The manager has said he's going to get to me the information as soon as it comes to him, and so I don't think he's going to make any kind of decision without me and the council knowing. And I think we can assure you that that I'm going to say we need to bring it back to LEAC, among others, before any decisions made. So that's where it stands.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to.
Earl makes a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
What time do we want the next meeting? 3 to 5 or 4 to 6?
I have a meeting that starts at 6:30 after this one. So if you bumped it up even to 3:30, that would help, but it's okay. It's not a earth-shaking.
I have a slight preference to go a little earlier, just because I have a little more time to get to the farmer's market.
3:30?
But I need some flexibility, because it's quite possible the PUC will schedule the next rules stakeholder meeting on the same date next month, just because that's a good time slot for them. So, but if people Joan, sounds like you prefer a little earlier. Others are okay with that. I'll try to do that.
3:30?
Subject to the PUC setting something that I really should be at. But whatever.
Well, we can change it the way this one was changed if we have to, no?
Yeah. I mean, I just made the decision. I consulted with Tad and Greg. Greg's the vice chair. And that's what we'll do. But tentatively, you want to go ahead with 3 o'clock or 3:30?
3:30.
3:30? Okay.
So 3:30 to 5:30?
Yep, let's do that. Okay, now there's a motion to adjourn from Joan. Is there a second for that motion?
What he said.
Okay, Woody seconds the motion to adjourn. I'm going to do a roll call. John?
Yes. John, yes.
Woody?
Yes.
Greg? Greg is nothing, yes. Joan?
Joan, yes.
And I will note that Jean left the meeting about 5 minutes ago or 10 minutes ago. So Greg, you can put that in your notes that Jean left the meeting at about 6:15. And I vote yes and declare the meeting adjourned.
6:11 is when he left.
6:11. Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay. Adios.
Chad, who took notes?
I took one note.
Okay.
You know, a lot of it was me rambling on about the status of CPNH rulemaking.
First time you've ever done that, Greg. It was really strange.
And you don't have to try to summarize all that other than a sentence or two.
Okay. Tad, if you wanna send me what you've got, and then I'll look at the recording and put it all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
buddy.
Clifton. Bye, John. Bye.
Bye-bye.